The rent was unbelievably cheap, which was the only reason Eleanor moved into the notorious haunted house. Its previous tenants had a grim track record. Some fled in terror, ending up institutionalized, while others hadn't been lucky enough to escape with their lives. So on her very first day, Eleanor bought an incense burner. She placed it carefully on a small table. "All right," she murmured to the empty air. "I understand how things work. From now on, consider yourself my secondary landlord. A spectral one perhaps, but a landlord nonetheless." He had hanged himself in this very apartment after his business went bankrupt. His spirit, bitter and resentful, had already violently driven away dozens of terrified occupants. But seeing this young woman offering incense daily, treating his presence with a strange sort of pragmatic respect, he found himself tolerating her. He grudgingly permitted her to share his space, this roof under which he had ended his mortal life. One human, one ghost. Their days fell into a bizarre routine, marked by the scent of cheap incense mingling with the steam from instant noodles. Julian started to believe this strange coexistence might last forever, until one day she fell in love. She brought home a young man, handsome enough on the surface but lacking any real substance, a hollow shell. The young man, Alex, grew impatient after just a few visits. Eleanor, however, was a conservative girl, hesitant to rush into physical intimacy. One evening, sensing Alex's intentions were about to turn forceful, Julian decided to intervene. He manifested his ghostly form just as Alex was about to make his move. The pretty boy coward was instantly frightened to death, collapsing on the spot. Eleanor, panicked, immediately started administering CPR. When the young man opened his eyes again, his entire aura had shifted, starkly different from before. A low, unfamiliar voice murmured from Alex's lips. "Perhaps, you could blow a few more breaths into me." Shanghai in October remained stubbornly hot and humid. Eleanor, drenched in sweat, ducked into a cramped, dingy real estate agency. The sign above the door was faded, the windows grimy. The rent on her previous place had gone up yet again. Unable to afford the increase, she'd been unceremoniously evicted by her landlady, forced to drag her meager belongings through the city's backstreets like a refugee, scouring the shadiest corners for any affordable listing. It wasn't that she didn't want a nicer place from a larger agency. Something with its own bathroom, maybe closer to work. But her entire savings amounted to just over 800 yuan. After accounting for food and basic expenses until her next paycheck, she'd be lucky to have half that left. 400 or 500 yuan a month. What kind of place could that possibly rent in Shanghai? Even a wandering spirit wouldn't dare ask for a plot in a graveyard with such audacity. The agency before her looked smaller than a speck of dust, the stack of flyers by the entrance thicker than a swarm of flies. Summoning her courage, she asked, "Excuse me, sir, do you have any apartments for rent?" An old man sitting by the door lifted his sweat-stained undershirt to wipe his brow. "What kind of place are you looking for, young lady?" He puffed out his chest slightly. "Let me tell you, aside from those fancy Thompson Riviera penthouses, I've got listings for everything." Eleanor noted the attempt to elevate his humble shop's prestige with the mention of luxury real estate, but she wasn't buying it. She forced a smile, revealing 8 neat teeth. "Well, do you have anything around 500 yuan? 500? The old man startled, genuinely shocked. In all his years running this agency in Shanghai, he'd never encountered a tenant quite this frugal. He scanned her up and down. Seeing a clean-cut, rather pretty young woman, his initial condescension deflated. Life wasn't easy for young people these days, he mused. "You know," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "As a matter of fact, I do." He shuffled behind a cluttered counter and pulled out a thick, messy stack of handwritten notes. Fumbling in a drawer, he found his glasses and perched them on his nose, squinting at her through the thick lenses. "It's haunted, though. You okay with that?" Haunted? Eleanor wasn't sure she'd heard right. "Seriously, sir? It's the 21st century. Even the government doesn't believe animals can magically transform anymore." The old man waved a dismissive hand. "Look, telling you it's haunted is part of my professional ethics. Whether you rent it or not is your business. Besides," he added, flipping through his notes, "if you don't take it, someone else will. Look here." He showed her the page. Sure enough, a long list of signatures trailed below the property description. More than a dozen people want to see this place. I just opened up today, haven't even had time for showings yet. Consider yourself lucky I'm offering it to you. Eleanor just stared. Gee, thanks, she thought wryly. It seemed poverty truly was scarier than ghosts these days. She felt the few crumpled bills left in her pocket. Taking a deep breath, she squared her shoulders. Okay, I'll take a look. The ghost house was located centrally. The building itself was old and weathered, but the location was prime, right next to a supermarket and the subway line, making her commute convenient. Stepping inside, Eleanor felt even more satisfied. The apartment was surprisingly spacious, a good 20 square meters, with its own bathroom and a small kitchen area. It had simple furnishings, and a small floral-patterned cloth covered the television, suggesting a previous female tenant. A gentle breeze stirred the curtains, letting sunlight stream through the window. It didn't feel frightening at all. In fact, it had a certain cozy, albeit worn charm. The old landlord hovered nervously at the doorway, refusing to step inside. He gestured vaguely into the room. Truth be told, he stage whispered, the last dozen or so people were scared off by, you know him. Heard one even ended up in a psychiatric hospital. You be careful, all right? Him. What did that even mean? At this point, Eleanor didn't care if the place was haunted by mischievous goblins or ancient demons. She needed a roof over her head. All right, let's settle up. Eleanor eagerly pulled out her cash. The old man carefully counted out 5 crisp red bills, then surprisingly handed 2 back to her. No, I won't take advantage. This covers the first month. Pay the deposit whenever you can. He didn't say it, but he clearly doubted she'd last even one night. Walking away, the old man felt a pang of conscience. Oh, ghost, he thought silently, be gentle with that poor girl. Sometimes living in this world is harder than being dead. Oh. With the keys in hand, Eleanor headed straight to the pedestrian street behind the old apartment block to buy some daily necessities. She was oblivious to the cold, unseen gaze that had fixed upon her the moment she stepped through the door, clinging to her back like an invisible shroud. Watching the young woman hurry through the alleys, laden with shopping bags, the figure suspended invisibly in midair let out a silent, contemptuous huff. She has no idea, Julian thought bitterly. That bright window ledge once framed my own grotesque death mask. That quaint floral cloth once covered my cooling corpse. My soul still hangs here, suspended in the middle of the living room, clinging to resentment, refusing to move on. He supposed he should try to be gentler with a girl. All right then, he decided with dark amusement. Tonight, I'll go for the classic green face and fangs approach. Maybe attack from behind. Darkness fell. Lights flickered on in the dilapidated apartment building. Eleanor, panting heavily, wrestled her 2 large plastic bags through the door, kicking it shut behind her. Julian watched with cold detachment as she emptied her bags onto the small table. A pile of assorted instant noodles, some wilted greens, a tangled string of what looked like tiny light bulbs, a few scraps of colorful fabric, and an overturned pot-like object. The small pot had patches of green copper rust on its bottom and several layers of price tags haphazardly stuck on. The lower layers were scribbled out, the topmost one proudly proclaimed 2 yuan. Clearly, it was an item so unsellable the shopkeeper had slashed the price to a ridiculous low just to get rid of it, and she had snapped up the bargain. His sharp, ghostly eyes then noticed her carefully retrieving something shiny from her backpack. She blew on it tenderly before standing on a wobbly stool to hang it from the central light fixture. It was a dreamcatcher silver gray, with asymmetrical pendants, cheap glittering beads and fluffy feathers. Undoubtedly another 10 yuan store special. A vein throbbed in Julian's spectral temple. He could almost picture the tacky tassels swaying in unison with his own decomposing body. Had it still been there? Was this girl intentionally insulting the profound tragedy of his death with her plastic, kitschy aesthetic? Who could tolerate such an affront? The ghost's fury began to simmer. But just as he was about to unleash his spectral rage, she righted the overturned pot on the table and took out a bundle of long, thin sticks. Great Spirit, she said, her voice surprisingly solemn. I understand the rules. You're my second landlord now. As long as I have food to eat, I'll offer you incense every day. That dilapidated object wasn't a pot at all. It was an incense burner. She placed the rust-bottomed burner squarely in the center of the table, held 3 sticks of incense between her fingers and bowed. Respectfully. Her bow was directed right towards him, a casual gesture of greeting, almost like acknowledging someone who was still alive. The incense sticks were lit. A strange feeling washed over Julian. So this was the difference between a wandering ghost and one with a home. The fragrant smoke seemed to know its way, drifting directly towards him, suffusing his entire being. It felt like every pore was being gently ironed, a comforting warmth spreading through his spectral form. Normally, the draft stirred up by living people felt like knives slicing his ethereal skin, an agony akin to slow dismemberment. But perhaps due to the incense offering, her movements around the room no longer caused him any discomfort. A question arose in his non-corporeal mind. Should he drive away such a considerate and respectful roommate? Roommate? He scoffed internally. She's not a roommate, she's my patron. While he wrestled with this dilemma, she had already ripped open a packet of instant noodles and was slurping them down beside the incense burner. Oh, by the way, she mumbled between bites, I'm Eleanor. Ellie for short. We can get properly acquainted later. Gotta eat first. Instant noodles seasoned with incense ash. That was certainly a first. A flicker of amusement touched him, quickly followed by a strange pang of unease. She's Eleanor, he thought. Then who am I? Yes. My name is Julian Croft. That name, uncalled and unthought of for so long, had almost faded completely from his memory. Night settled in. Eleanor took out a needle and thread and began stitching the scraps of fabric together into a patchwork wall hanging. She carefully hung it on the bare white wall of the living room. Perhaps it was the lingering scent of incense, but Julian found himself thinking the makeshift tapestry actually looked rather nice. Much like Eleanor herself, it possessed a sort of unconventional charm, plain at first glance, but increasingly pleasant the longer one looked. Of course, if he retained any of his former aesthetic sense, he'd recognize it as a rather charming attempt at bohemian style. After hanging the cloth, he saw her staring intently at the bed frame for a moment before hurrying out the door again. That bed frame. The last tenant had broken it in a panic during one of Julian's more dramatic appearances. Julian remained suspended near the ceiling, swaying gently. He watched as Eleanor returned, puffing and panting, carrying an armful of salvaged wooden planks. She squatted down and with surprising dexterity, fashioned a sturdy bed frame from the reclaimed wood. If he weren't a ghost, he might have felt ashamed just watching her struggle. But she wasn't finished. Next, she untangled the string of tiny lights and draped them over the newly constructed frame, creating a sort of canopy. She plugged it in, switched off the main light and, wow, impressive. He recognized this style. It was that Instagrammable look. For less than 30 yuan, his new roommate, his patron, had created a cozy, Insta-worthy bedroom nook. If the old landlord saw this, he'd definitely raise the rent. He had to admit, sometimes even a bitter ghost could be touched by a little romance. A ripple of something akin to poetry stirred within him. An unexpected phrase drifted into his thoughts, turning a broken life into poetry. Her work done, the girl sat on the edge of the bed, resting her head in her hand, looking lost in thought. Her hand was propped oddly against her temple, fingers splayed. Julian drifted down from his usual perch near the ceiling, curiosity piqued. He floated closer to examine her strange posture. One of her fingers was noticeably swollen, a dark bruise already forming beneath the skin. She must have hit it with the hammer earlier. His proximity brought an unnatural chill. Eleanor shivered suddenly. Whoa, why is it so cold in here all of a sudden? In truth, the room was always unnaturally cold, housing, as it did, a malevolent spirit, Julian? She had simply been too busy and overheated earlier to notice. Now, however, the chilling rumors flooded back into her mind. Safety under the covers, safety under the covers. She chanted, scrambling beneath her duvet like a frightened rabbit. She burrowed down, muttering, feels like I forgot something. Then her eyes lit up. Forgot to post on social media. With trembling hands, she unlocked her phone, rapidly editing a selfie until her nostrils were practically blurred out of existence, and posted it along with some pictures of her newly decorated room. Caption: Day 1 cohabiting with the great spirit landlord. Julian, peering over her shoulder, remained impassive. It was clear Ellie had friends. Comments appeared almost instantly. She tapped out replies with her good fingers, her injured one held stiffly. Friend 1. OMG Ellie, you'd rather live with a ghost than use a credit card? You're wild. Ellie, no way. Indulge once and you'll indulge forever. Friend 2. Ellie, you still haven't thrown away that tin yuan trash dreamcatcher. Ellie. Tin yuan can't buy love, but it can buy happiness. Friend 3. Girl, that haunted house is infamous. Everyone in the city knows about it. You've got guts. Ellie. I'm a party member. Protected by the halo of marks. Ahahaha. Eleanor giggled as she typed. In the space she couldn't see, the great spirit landlord watched her with an inscrutable expression. He suddenly had a strong urge to materialize right then and there, just to shatter her materialistic worldview. Should he? To avoid disturbing his patron's sleep, Julian considerately retreated to the farthest diagonal corner of the apartment for the night. The first night passed peacefully for both. Before leaving for work the next morning, Eleanor meticulously polished the incense burner until it gleamed. Great spirit, she announced, lighting fresh incense. I'll light this for you every day. She bowed again, then placed a thick, red-covered book on the table beside the burner. But you also need to respect the duvet seal rule. Remember, your existence isn't exactly scientific or objective. If I even start to feel scared, hey, just keep it quiet, okay? I'm leaving my copy of Marxist Materialism here for you. Feel free to flip through it in your spare time. The implication was clear. I hope you know what's good for you. Julian. As soon as she left, he floated directly over the incense burner and took a deep, long inhale. He felt his spectral essence, or whatever it was, practically ascend through the top of his head. Damn, this stuff was addictive. Why did it feel so good? Humans got high on catnip. Ghosts apparently got high on incense ash. It was probably the same euphoric sensation. Having been a ghost for some time, he could now focus his spectral energy to manipulate small light objects. So while Eleanor was out, he politely rummaged through her belongings. He found several hefty textbooks with titles like Chinese Linguistics and Introduction to Ancient Chinese. Tucked within the pages were a few faded photographs, Eleanor leaning against an older man with similar features, both smiling sweetly. The backgrounds were either irrigation ditches crisscrossing fields or plots of tall sorghum and corn. Her backpack also contained graduation photos from elementary, middle, and high school. He noticed she seemed uncomfortable in front of the camera, her brow furrowed tightly, looking remarkably serious amidst groups of smiling children. A picture of a girl from a small town gradually formed in his mind. Simple family background, income primarily from farming. Perpetually single, likely too burdened by survival to even think about romance. Not exceptionally gifted. Academically, having transferred from a vocational college to pursue her undergraduate degree, and now studying intensely for the postgraduate entrance exam. Aiming for a literature major at a different university entirely, Julian knew that children from small places like Eleanor weren't lazy. Often, the quality of local education simply couldn't keep pace with their potential. Thinking of this, he vaguely recalled a time when his company was still solvent. He had participated in a charity drive, delivering supplies to rural areas. He remembered personally handing stacks of study guides to eager children. The last girl to receive books had been thin and sallow, her cheeks rouged bright red like a monkey's bottom. She had grinned at him, revealing startlingly white teeth. "Thank you, uncle," she chirped. He had returned a polite, practiced smile. Being called uncle at 21 had stung his pride just a little. Julian hadn't dwelled on such memories for a long time. Being a ghost gradually erodes one's ability to think like a human. The sound of the door opening snapped him back to the present. Eleanor was home from work. To maximize her study time, she worked shifts at a private factory. 6 hours a day on a rotating schedule. To save money, she ate only 2 meals daily, one of which was invariably instant noodles boiled with a few limp greens. This time he naturally settled into the space opposite her as she ate. One person slurping noodles, one spirit absorbing incense fumes. As she ate, she switched on the small television. A poorly made Hong Kong ghost movie was playing. A voluptuous female ghost writhed seductively on screen, attempting to entice the male lead. Eleanor scoffed between mouthfuls. Who with any proper education actually believes in this nonsense? No sooner had the words left her mouth than a sudden violent gust of wind ripped through the apartment, sending the floral TV cover flying. Faster than thought, she dropped her bowl, scrambled onto the bed, and pulled the duvet over her head, screaming. "We agreed on the duvet seal." Julian. Damn it. That really wasn't me. Oh. Just then, the TV channel abruptly switched to a weather forecast. Julian focused a sliver of his energy, increasing the volume. The announcer's pleasant voice suddenly boomed through the room. Today's forecast: cloudy with periods of heavy rain. Typhoon. Lucy is making landfall and moving north to south. The Shanghai municipal government has issued emergency warnings and urged residents in all districts to take safety precautions. Oh, it was just a typhoon. Relief washed over Eleanor. She hopped off the bed, quickly finished her noodles, and immediately buried herself in her books. The postgraduate entrance exam was in December. Her life had become a relentless cycle. Work, study, sleep. The pressure was immense. Ouch, damn, that hurts. Turning a page inevitably aggravated her injured finger. She blew on it absently, her focus entirely on the dense text, occasionally rubbing the sore spot. Julian hovered silently nearby, an invisible observer. Like him, like Eleanor, some people were simply born into the world on hard mode. Even the protagonists of tragic literature rarely endured struggles more hopeless or numbing than the realities of ordinary, difficult lives. Like his own business ruined, diagnosed with liver cancer, choosing a lonely end in a cheap rental to avoid burdening his family. He had lived ostentatiously but died obscurely, all to erase his debts. He had to admit, he saw a reflection of his own past desperation in Eleanor's relentless drive. The girl studying was clearly exhausted. To stay awake, she kept wiping her face with a damp cloth, muttering a difficult phrase over and over. The rabbit runs, the rabbit runs. Tizoji, what kind of grammatical usage is this? Her muttering grew increasingly frantic. Julian felt a pang of sympathy. Finally, unable to bear her struggle, he whispered almost inaudibly, "It's used like a verb here." Eleanor's eyes widened. Right. Used like a verb. Meaning to flee like a rabbit. She scribbled it down, then froze, a sudden chill running down her spine. Wait, who just spoke? Julian held his spectral breath as she cautiously got off the bed, checked every corner of the small apartment, peered under the table, even glanced behind the curtains. Finding nothing, she eventually shook her head, sighing. Wow, I'm studying so hard I'm starting to hear things. Atta girl, Ellie, that's dedication. Julian. If it weren't for his family's deep scholarly background and his own considerable knowledge of classical Chinese, that question could easily have stumped him too. Perhaps startled by the auditory hallucination, Eleanor decided to scroll through her phone for a bit to calm her nerves. Once again, Julian drifted closer to peek. He noticed a new comment on her post from a few days ago. Friend 4. Ellie, seriously, aren't you scared of the ghost in that house? She paused, then typed a thoughtful reply. Even if he is a ghost, I think he's a good ghost. She added another message. Maybe if a bad guy breaks in, he'll help scare them away. Julian felt a faint warmth at having his character affirmed. Well, of course, he thought. For 3 sticks of incense a day, I'll protect you. Isn't that just basic reciprocity? A fair trade? Then she had another flash of inspiration and typed, beaming. Think how much people pay for guard dogs. I get supernatural security for free. Genius. Julian. Could she try to phrase things a little more delicately? He had considered revealing himself, having a proper conversation with her. But he worried about shattering her firmly held materialistic worldview. Besides, could humans and ghosts truly interact closely without consequence? Fearful that his mere presence might negatively affect her living body, he continued to spend his nights hanging on the back of the entrance door, maintaining the maximum possible distance from where Eleanor slept. Honestly, when a malevolent ghost tried to be considerate, it was surprisingly exhausting. Oh. The days passed in a quiet rhythm. But one incident occurred that made Julian genuinely concerned about his patron's mental state. Usually, when she worked the early shift, Ellie would cook a large pot of vegetable congee in the morning to take to the factory, enough for 2 meals. That particular morning, she was so sleep-deprived she could barely keep her eyes open. Rushing out the door, she forgot to turn off the gas stove. The congee boiled over, extinguishing the flame. As for Julian, he happened to be in a state of deep spectral meditation, something akin to human sleep but far more profound. Especially after inhaling Eleanor's incense offering. A long period of rest felt incredibly restorative, almost divine. When he finally emerged from his trance, the room was thick with the acrid, rotten egg smell of unburnt gas. Ghosts didn't have a sense of smell, but the melted handle on the pot told him everything he needed to know. Eleanor is trying to kill herself accidentally. Before he could mentally command the window to fly open, He heard the sound of a key turning in the lock. Click. The girl stood in the doorway, puzzled. Huh, why is the light off? Then the smell hit her. She gasped, rushing to turn off the gas valve. Behind her, Julian clutched his spectral chest, letting out a silent sigh of relief. He felt like he'd aged another century. If he hadn't used his energy to instantly break the electrical circuit, the concentration of carbon monoxide in the room could have easily been fatal the moment she flipped the light switch. After turning off the gas and throwing open the window, the light suddenly flickered back on. She sighed, relieved. Oh, it was just a power outage. Julian. When it came to being oblivious, Eleanor was truly in a league of her own. Still, he knew he couldn't really blame her. She was just too exhausted. With the unified entrance exam only days away, the constant pressure of work and study was grinding her down. She was so tired she was falling asleep while boiling water. His worries proved prophetic. Under the sustained high pressure and lack of any real outlet for stress, Eleanor became increasingly agitated and anxious, like a small animal sensing impending danger, constantly on edge. On the morning of the exam, Julian watched her nervously shift her admission ticket from her pocket to her bag, then from her bag to her pencil case, trying several locations before finally tucking it, with great care, into the side pocket of her backpack. However, that side pocket had a hole in it. As soon as she walked out the door, the small folded square of paper fluttered out and landed unnoticed in the corridor. Julian watched helplessly as people walked back and forth, trampling the ticket, quickly rendering it dirty and creased. He had seen her studying constantly, standing, eating, even muttering classical poetry in her sleep. She had worked so hard. To fail now because of this, what would it do to her? Would she break down? Would she weep uncontrollably? Or would she, like him, end up hanging alone in a desolate room, undiscovered? More importantly, if she did take her own life, would she become like him? A fierce battle raged within the ghost's core. After a long moment, the still air in the room suddenly erupted into a furious gale, accompanied by a mournful spectral wail. Damn it all. I owe you, don't I? Ghosts of the underworld couldn't withstand the winds of the living world. The movement of air felt like being rolled over mountains of knives. Worse, today was relentlessly sunny. The sunlight felt like being dropped into boiling oil by the king of hell himself. Julian flitted desperately between the shadows cast by pedestrians, struggling to keep up with the figure frantically pedaling a shared bike ahead of him. Eleanor. Turn around. Look back at me. Look at the ghost enduring hellfire for you. Under the blazing sun, Eleanor arrived at the examination hall. The first thing she did was reach for her admission ticket. She checked the side pocket. Empty. Nothing but a heart-stopping tear in the fabric. Oh. The exam was about to start, but Eleanor was still frantically searching her worn-out bag. Your admission ticket, student? An invigilator walked over, rapping sharply on her desk. Whispers erupted around her. Other students glanced over, some smirking at her desperate state. She felt plunged into an icy abyss, her eyes scanning the room with blank panic. I know I brought it. I remember putting it. A nearby window was wide open, letting in a biting north wind that chilled her flushed cheeks. In that instant she felt an overwhelming urge to, isn't this it? The invigilator picked up a crumpled piece of paper from the corner of her desk, giving her a reproachful look. Sit down. Prepare for the exam. The 2 days of exams finally ended. Eleanor felt a wave of relief wash over her, the tension finally easing. Thinking back to the moment she thought she'd lost her ticket, the memory of nearly wanting to jump from that window still sent a shiver down her spine. She felt an immense sense of gratitude for having survived the ordeal. Great spirit, she chirped later that evening, lighting extra incense sticks. That was a close call the other day. Here's some extra incense as thanks for looking out for me. Julian naturally accepted the offering with cool spectral dignity. In his opinion, Eleanor was celebrating prematurely. When the results were released, he watched with a heavy heart as she climbed onto the window sill, staring blankly into the distant night. The apartment was on a high floor, lacking safety bars, and the window frame itself was slightly loose. It was a precarious position. Thankfully, after sitting there silently for a long moment, she seemed to recognize the danger herself and carefully climbed back down. Months had passed since his sun exposure, but Julian's spectral form still hadn't fully healed. He was currently standing beneath the window, absorbing the moonlight, When she passed through his incorporeal form several times on her way down, it felt strange. He had spent the intervening weeks lurking in the darkest corners, nursing his invisible wounds. Now, watching her oblivious figure, a swarm of malicious thoughts suddenly surged. Do you want to see me like this? Scarred and broken, all for you? Would you run? Would you scream? Would you go mad? The moonlight was cool, the world outside seemed peaceful, but the temperature around Eleanor plummeted instantly, as if she'd been plunged into ice water. She whipped her head around. The space beneath the window was empty. Nothing there. Where she couldn't see, Julian squeezed his eyes shut tightly. When you're human for too long, you might tire of being human. When you're a ghost for too long, you might tire of being a ghost. Despite the agonizing journey back from the exam hall, despite the burning wounds the sunlight had inflicted, he still couldn't bring himself to hate her. Not when she remembered to offer him extra incense, sharing her small, insignificant joys with him. This strange life, one human and one ghost warming each other against the cold, had found its own fragile harmony. Just when he thought this peculiar routine might continue indefinitely, Ellie brought home a man. A man with 4 healthy limbs, distinct features, living flesh, warm skin, the kind of man Julian had looked down upon in life, but now envied with a bitter ache in death. The man was really more of a boy, around Eleanor's age, dressed in a slightly grimy hoodie. He had decent features, a tall, lean build, and a pair of narrow Korean drama-style eyes that were perhaps his only interesting quality. But Julian took one look at the boy's shifty gaze and knew, instantly, that he was trouble. 10 out of 10 unreliable. He instinctively slipped into the role of Ellie's protective father, shooting invisible daggers at the unfortunate young man. "Ellie, your place is freezing," the boy Alex complained, then casually grabbed her hand. "Warm me up." Julian almost popped a spectral blood vessel. Julian. Eyes glowing red. JPG. Excuse me. Did the girl consent to you grabbing her hand like that? Fortunately, Ellie's reaction didn't disappoint him. She frowned slightly and subtly pulled her hand away. "It's okay. I'll get you some hot water." They were clearly in that awkward pre-relationship phase, hovering just before commitment. Eleanor was torn between wanting closeness and maintaining her boundaries. But Alex wasn't one to give up easily. As dusk settled, he pressed his advantage, asking if he could stay the night. When she politely refused, his expression soured. "I walk you all the way home, and you just kick me out like this?" He knew exactly how to play the victim. Eleanor quickly backtracked. "That's not what I meant. How about, I make you a bowl of noodles before you go?" He clearly wasn't interested in her plain noodles. "My place is so far away," he whined pointedly. "The least you could do is cover my bus fare back." As predicted, Eleanor sighed and pulled out a 100-yuan bill, even reminding him to be careful on his way home. Alex finally looked satisfied, smiling as he said goodbye. Julian rolled his spectral eyes towards the ceiling. He knew Eleanor had a certain appeal. She had a fresh, pretty face, the kind of girl who looked good even without makeup. What some might call marriage material. She looked like the type who'd be good with kids, keep a tidy house, and wouldn't spend much money, qualities that, unfortunately, made her seem very attractive to certain kinds of men. Namely, the kind who thought she looked easy to deceive. After Alex left, Julian trailed silently behind him. He watched the boy slip into a dingy internet cafe down the street, quickly log onto a computer, and start a video call with a bleached blonde girl on the other end. "Babe, guess what? I got money for that new skin you wanted." "Wow, hubby, you're the best. Where'd you get the cash?" "Some naive chick I met. She basically gave it to me, haha." The words were barely out of his mouth when the overhead fluorescent lights flickered violently, turning a terrifying blood red. Then, with a series of sharp cracks, every single light tube in the row exploded simultaneously. Alex screamed, falling backward off his chair, drawing stares from everyone else in the cafe. Clearly, Julian's control over illusions and spectral energy had leveled up. Hovering invisibly above, the dark figure didn't know how else to vent the fury churning within him. He zipped back and forth through the sparking light fixtures like a miniature tornado. Why did such a decent, innocent girl have to encounter a parasitic lowlife like this? Wasn't just surviving hard enough for her already? Did the world have to inflict this kind of cruelty too? Who was he even asking? He didn't know himself. If there were no gods or Buddhas, how could his own existence be explained? And if there were gods, why were they so harsh towards her? Time passed. Soon it was the 14th day of the 7th lunar month, the Ghost Festival, when the gates of the underworld supposedly opened. Eleanor had started folding yellow joss paper the night before, filling an entire bag. As night fell, she lit the usual incense, added an extra bowl and chopsticks to the table, and then placed a dented metal basin in the center of the living room. One by one, she began tossing the paper ingots into the basin, watching them burn. A faint flicker of anticipation stirred within Julian. Was she burning those for him? Actually, he had some good news he wanted to share with her too. Perhaps due to the constant vaping of incense smoke, he had recently discovered he could solidify his form, just for brief moments. This had sparked a daring idea. What if he materialized as a devastatingly handsome man, swept her off her feet, completely overshadowing that Janan scumbag Alex, and then staged a poignant, tragic death right before her eyes? The main goal would be to demonstrate through example what a truly perfect man looked like. Hopefully it would raise her standards for the future. That night, he focused his energy, coalescing into a semi-solid form, standing near the window to absorb the moonlight. Suddenly, he heard movement from the bedroom. Eleanor was rubbing her eyes, shuffling towards his direction, probably heading for the bathroom. Almost maliciously, he remained perfectly still in the moonlight, watching her approach, eyes still half closed. What will she do when she sees a hazy figure standing by the window? Will she scream? Will she faint? She lowered her hands. Her eyes widened. Her mouth dropped open. She looked utterly stunned. And then, like a weary bird finally finding its nest, she threw herself into his arms. The force of her embrace nearly knocked his partially solidified form backward. "I've missed you so much," she sobbed into his chest. "Is it only because the ghost gate is open today that you could come? Can you visit me every night? Even just in my dreams? You feel so cold. Don't they have blankets over there? Why? Why did you work so hard your whole life, only to suffer over there too?" Her words dissolved into tears, the heartbroken cries of a child starved for affection. Julian was completely taken aback by this torrent of warmth, closeness, and mistaken identity. Deeply moved, he cleared his throat, preparing a suitably dramatic, ghostly introduction. But before he could speak, she looked up at him, her eyes blurry with tears. "Are you okay over there, Dad? Julian?" She clung to him, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, the hardest part isn't the lack of food or nice things. It's that everyone else has their own lives." Her voice cracked. "Nobody loves me." Staring down at her tear-streaked face, he felt a sharp, unexpected pain in the region where his heart used to be. She craves love so desperately. She's not even afraid of a ghost? He cleared his throat again, trying to mimic what he imagined a ghost might sound like. A trembling, eerie whisper. "You could try dating." Eleanor blushed, giving his chest a gentle swat. "Dad, how did you know? I met him on the assembly line." "How did I know?" Julian thought grimly. "Your dad saw him with his own spectral eyes." He adopted a solemn tone. "Dad doesn't object to you dating, Ellie, but you must prioritize character. Don't let anyone take advantage of you, understand?" "Hmm." Eleanor nodded obediently like a good child. Then she asked hesitantly, "Dad, it's been so long. Can I see your face?" Could he refuse? Perhaps it was the addictive warmth of her embrace, but he found himself unable to say no. He concentrated, trying to recall Alex's features, morphing his own spectral face to match. The result was apparently less than perfect. She took one look, held his face in her hands, and burst into even louder sobs. "Dad! Oh, Dad, did someone smash your face over there? Julian?" He stood there awkwardly as she hugged him tightly, a strange mix of emotions swirling within him. Why is this girl so clingy with her father? He wondered. Damn it, it actually made him feel a little jealous. "Ellie," he said, gently stroking her dark hair, trying for a deep paternal tone. "Have you ever heard of, appropriate father-daughter boundaries?" They spent most of the night like that, embracing, sharing feelings, though clearly on completely different wavelengths. The consequence was that Eleanor woke up the next morning violently ill, vomiting and running a high fever. Prolonged contact with his ghostly chill had taken its toll. Julian searched the apartment frantically but only found 2 expired cold pills. Seeing her burning up, barely conscious, he clenched his spectral jaw and, focusing his energy, dialed the most frequently called number in her contacts list. Eleanor slept for nearly a full day and night. When she finally opened her eyes, still groggy, a girl with a round face was shaking her shoulder insistently. It took her a moment to recognize her coworker from the production line next to hers. Just then, another girl entered the hospital room carrying 2 takeout containers. "You're awake," she exclaimed, relieved. Where am I?" Eleanor asked, confused. "Your boyfriend called us. Said he had an emergency but asked us to bring you here." Suddenly, Eleanor found herself bombarded by excited chatter from both sides. "Where did you find such a hottie? Seriously, he was gorgeous. Those legs, that waist, that body. Does he have a brother? Maybe you should let me have him instead." Eleanor. She assumed they were talking about Alex, the boy she'd met at the factory, and didn't question it further. Before being discharged, she made sure to call him. "Hey, thanks for helping me out the other day when I was sick." Alex, who had recently been dumped by his blonde girlfriend, was unusually pleasant. "Don't mention it. Happy to help." He hung up, feeling a surge of smug satisfaction. So what if she had mistaken him for someone else? He'd been looking for a way to get closer to her, and now an opportunity had practically fallen into his lap. "Hey, can I come over tonight?" he texted her later. I'm still not feeling great." "No problem. All the more reason for me to come take care of you." Even Julian, with all his worldly experience and otherworldly existence, couldn't have anticipated the insidious, opportunistic nature of human wickedness. The sudden illness and hospital visit completely drained Eleanor's meager savings. She was reduced to eating plain white congee, unable to even afford instant noodles anymore. Meanwhile, Julian resumed his self-imposed exile, hanging himself on the wall, mentally reviewing his reckless actions and the negative impact they'd had on her. Knock knock. An urgent rapping sounded at the door. Eleanor put down her bowl and went to open it. Alex stood there, his narrow eyes gleaming. "Came to check on you." He had apparently made an effort for the occasion, slicking his hair back into a style that reeked of cheap, suffocating hair wax. The smell alone made Eleanor sneeze violently several times. Julian watched coldly as Alex lingered, deliberately dragging out his visit, eventually sitting down on the edge of her bed. His gaze was predatory, roaming over her thin frame like a wolf sizing up its prey. A man visiting a girl's apartment alone at night. His intentions were painfully obvious. Eleanor felt a flicker of affection for Alex, but she hadn't entirely lost her caution. She deliberately left the front door slightly ajar before heading to the kitchen to make him the noodles she'd promised earlier. As her back was turned, Alex followed her silently, leaning forward, clenching his fists. Julian reacted instantly. He's going to force himself on her. Eleanor, busy at the stove, felt a sudden rush of air behind her, followed by a heavy thud. Alex had collapsed onto the floor, his face pale as death, jaw clenched tight. "Alex! Alex, what's wrong?" She rushed to his side, shaking him, but he remained completely still, unresponsive. In desperation, she pried open his lips and began blowing air into his mouth, performing CPR. At that moment, Julian felt himself being violently pulled into a hot, moist, suffocating space. The pressure was immense, crushing his fragile, spectral form, shattering it into fragments, then reforming it into something cold and liquid that flowed into limbs he didn't recognize. When he opened his eyes again, the first thing he saw was Eleanor's face close to his, a mixture of disgust and determination as she continued the artificial respiration. Seeing him awake, she immediately recoiled, letting his head drop back onto the floor with a dull thud. Julian, now inhabiting Alex's body. "You could have kept going for a few more breaths," he thought wryly. "A few more and I might have actually come back to life properly." He started to speak, but the overwhelming scent of cheap hair wax emanating from his own head nearly made him gag. He changed tack. "Excuse me," he croaked, the voice unfamiliar. "Could I possibly use your bathroom?" Eleanor stared, completely bewildered, as the young man on her floor scrambled up, looking nauseous, and practically fled into the bathroom. An hour later, a thoroughly scrubbed, he'd showered 3 times, Alex emerged, looking clean and refreshed. He sat down in the living area, and the narrow eyes that were Alex's only notable feature now held an unprecedented calmness and clarity. If Eleanor could have peered into his mind, she would have found a kilogram of frantic questions. Who am I? Where am I? What just happened? Alex had lunged too quickly. Julian had only had time to solidify his form, acting as an immovable shield in front of her. The next thing he knew, he was being squeezed relentlessly, and then he woke up like this. He couldn't exactly say it was a bad outcome. Okay, universe, he thought, I guess I really am your favorite illegitimate child. Oh. Julian, now trapped in Alex's body, mumbled an excuse and quickly left Eleanor's apartment. He found a deserted alleyway and emptied Alex's pockets under the dim glow of a street lamp. Wallet, keys, phone. Luckily, Alex carried his ID for accessing internet cafes. Using the information on the card and phone, Julian pieced together some basic facts about his new vessel. Alex Chun, male, 23 years old. Total cash on hand, 156 yuan. Current address, a suburb about 10 kilometers away on the outskirts of Shanghai. He took the subway across half the city and found the address, an apartment door plastered with locksmith ads. He knocked. An elderly woman opened the door, took one look at him, and immediately tried to slam it shut. Julian quickly put his hand out to stop her. Please, he said, forcing a pathetic tone into Alex's voice. Just let me stay one night. I'm not here to ask for money. He paused, adding for extra effect. It's really tough out there, Grandma. The silver-haired old woman hesitated, her expression softening slightly. Finally, she relented, coldly gesturing towards a narrow sofa in the cramped living room where he could curl up for the night. Julian assumed she was Alex's paternal grandmother, but she was actually his maternal grandmother. Alex Chun was a textbook parasite, a chronic leech. After his single mother remarried, he had become increasingly aimless, eventually scamming his grandmother out of her meager savings, her coffin fund, to spend on online games. Heartbroken and fed up, she had finally kicked him out. Of course, none of this historical drama was Julian's primary concern at that moment. Later, in the small, grimy bathroom, he stared down at his borrowed body with considerable apprehension. Okay, has this thing been used? Are there any unpleasant diseases I should know about? In his previous life, Julian had dated, but relationships had always fizzled out due to his intense work schedule. He'd always been fastidious about his personal conduct, even during his wealthiest period, limiting himself to polite socializing at business functions, always maintaining his reputation and health. His mind raced with anxieties. He used Alex's fingerprint to unlock the phone and, curled up on the narrow sofa, began scrolling through Alex's chat history. The very first conversation was an explosive rant from the blonde girlfriend, cursing him out. Reading between the lines, it seemed Alex was so cheap he even made her pay for their hotel rooms. Based on that level of stinginess, Julian reasoned the equipment downstairs was likely unused. Probably. He scrolled further, finding several messages where Alex complained to online friends about being a virgin. A wave of profound relief washed over him. Okay, good. He woke before dawn the next morning. He made the old woman a simple bowl of egg noodles, left it on the table, and slipped out quietly. Alex only had a high school diploma, limiting his job prospects to manual labor, moving, delivery, assembly lines. And thanks to his inability to handle hardship, he never lasted long in any position. He had quit the factory where he met Eleanor just a few days prior. So Julian's first stop was the local job recruitment market. He wandered through the bustling crowd, scanning the various booths before stopping at a more upscale-looking setup, representing a finance company. He cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said, his voice now steady and clear. "Your sign mentions exceptional talent may be considered regardless of qualifications. Is that genuine?" The recruiter behind the table glanced at Alex's dirty hoodie and gave a dismissive smirk, neither confirming nor denying. Undeterred, Julian launched into a self-introduction, speaking fluent, polished business English that immediately turned heads. The main HR representative sitting in the middle stared, mouth agape. But you're not familiar with our specific business sector." "I am confident," Julian replied smoothly, "that my learning capacity can overcome any industry-specific knowledge gaps within a short period. I ask only that you give a young man like myself an opportunity." He delivered this last sentence seamlessly, switching between 4 different languages: English, Mandarin, Cantonese, and French. He had quickly assessed the situation. This financial institution had branches near international communities, catering primarily to clients from Hong Kong, overseas Chinese, and foreigners. High potential earnings, relatively low entry barrier. It was perfect for his current situation. The HR representative studied him intently for a long moment, then finally asked for his contact information. On the way back, Julian looked at the interview location address saved on the phone and allowed himself a small, determined smile. She is so ordinary and yet so precious, he thought. For her, I will live again properly this time. 3 months later, Eleanor discovered a new neighbor had moved into the apartment directly opposite hers. Her ghost house was so infamous throughout Shanghai that the entire building suffered from low occupancy. This was the first time she'd seen anyone move in since she arrived. And the face was familiar. It was Alex. But different. He wasn't wearing the awful hair wax anymore. His hair was cut in a neat, stylish crop. He wore a simple charcoal gray t-shirt and white shorts. His shoulders seemed broader, his legs longer. He looked remarkably good. She also remembered him having a slight slouch. Why did he look so tall and straight now? Alex? What are you doing moving in here? He offered a faint smile that somehow made her heart beat faster. Convenient for taking care of you, he replied easily. The fiercely independent Eleanor bristled. I don't need taking care of. I can manage perfectly fine on my own. He simply walked past her and into her apartment. You should eat fewer instant noodles, he commented, heading towards her kitchen. They'll make your face square. What? Where did that bizarre theory come from? My face isn't square at all. People tell me I have good bone structure. Eleanor opened her mouth to argue, but then she saw him standing in her small kitchen, expertly flipping a spatula. The gesture was unexpectedly cool. Making pan-fried shrimp with garlic butter, he announced. Want some? Her planned rebuttal instantly transformed. Yes. So he moved in. And not only did he move in, but he also arrived with bags full of fresh fish, shrimp, and vegetables. Claiming he hadn't bought appliances yet, he proceeded to fill her small, pitiful refrigerator to bursting. While he cooked up a storm in the kitchen, sweating in the heat, Eleanor found herself dutifully shuttling ingredients back and forth in the living room. Speaking of Julian/Alex in the kitchen, since the departure of the ghostly second landlord, the apartment had lost its natural air conditioning. The kitchen lacked proper ventilation, and cooking the shrimp nearly melted him. When Eleanor brought in some fruit, she found him standing there, having shed his t-shirt, wearing only her small, tight apron over his bare torso. Sweat glistened on his well-defined muscles. His waist was lean, tapering sharply above his hips, and the deep indentations where his shorts met his waistline were unexpectedly distracting. Eleanor's first instinct was to tell him to put his shirt back on. Hey, why are you? He turned to look at her, those striking narrow eyes filled with a questioning look. She scanned him up and down, and somehow her words changed. Course. Nothing. You must be working hard. She finished lamely, then picked up a tiny, palm-sized fan and started fanning him awkwardly. Wiping sweat from his brow, he instructed her. My grandmother is ill, I need to go check on her later, so I'm making extra. Freeze it. Eat it when you're hungry. Seeing her distracted gaze, he prompted gently. Did you hear me? Ellie seemed slightly dazed. So white. I mean, smells great. No, I mean the shrimp. They look delicious. Julian, already accustomed to her quirky train of thought, just shook his head with a small smile. He expertly scooped the sizzling shrimp from the pan and started stir-frying some vegetables. His cooking skills were undeniable. Eleanor couldn't stop herself from sucking the savory juices from the shrimp heads. This is incredible, she exclaimed. No wonder you turned your nose up at my noodles. Hearing her recall a detail related to the real Alex made Julian cough uncomfortably. He wanted his presence to completely erase the shadow of that parasite from her life, but he knew it would take time. They ate together, enjoying the delicious meal. So, Eleanor asked between bites, what's this about your grandmother being sick? Julian didn't want to involve her too deeply, so he kept the details brief. His new job was going exceptionally well. He'd earned a 5-figure commission in his first month and was promoted to sales manager shortly after passing probation. He had planned to move closer to Eleanor sooner, but then Alex's grandmother had fallen ill. The old woman had been suffering from a chronic condition for a long time but had delayed seeking proper treatment due to the cost. Julian had spent the past few weeks arranging hospital care and finally managed to transfer her to a stable condition in a nursing facility. As soon as she was settled, he moved into the apartment opposite Eleanor's. He still felt the need to keep a close eye on her. After their hearty meal, they went for a walk along the pedestrian street downstairs to aid digestion. Looking at the tall, handsome young man beside her, Eleanor felt like she was meeting him for the first time. Before, looking at him always triggered a subtle urge to retreat. But now she found him incredibly easy on the eyes. What had changed? Was it possible for a person to transform so dramatically? Beyond his appearance, he was also an engaging conversationalist, and more importantly, a willing listener. When she spoke, his narrow eyes would focus on her with gentle attentiveness, seeming to encourage her to share more. "Everyone says I live in a haunted house," she commented casually. "Why would you dare rent the place right across from me?" She tilted her head. "Do you actually believe in ghosts?" A light breeze ruffled his hair. A mischievous glint appeared in his eyes. Even if there is a ghost," she continued defensively, "he's not scared of me being poor, and I'm not scared of him being a ghost. We have an understanding." Her earnest declaration seemed to amuse him greatly. He burst out laughing, a warm, genuine laugh, completely different from the forced, awkward laughter she remembered from before. This laugh was rich and controlled, like the deep notes of a cello, yet filled with an open, lyrical quality. She felt slightly indignant. "Besides, I'm not staying here forever. Once I pass my exams and get into grad school, I can finally leave this place." His laughter subsided immediately. His clear eyes held a gentle curiosity. "Where are you planning to go?" Talking about her aspirations made Eleanor flush with a mixture of excitement and shyness. "I really want to get into Shanghai Normal University," she confessed. "I missed the interview cutoff by 6 points this year. I could transfer to another school, but I just don't want to." She was full of uncertain dreams, brave yet hesitant. He, in contrast, seemed grounded and wise. He voiced a practical concern she often ignored. "Working and studying like this, isn't it taking a toll on your health?" Eleanor's shoulders slumped slightly. "But you need to survive, right? And you need to have dreams too." "Is that so?" He smiled, a soft, understanding smile. "You only get one life, Eleanor. It's not meant for settling. So try again." His eyes, clear and captivating, seemed to reflect the starlight above. "I'll support you." Long after their figures disappeared down the street, the owner of the Tinyuan store stood watching. Unlike most people, his eyes were clouded with white cataracts, lacking visible pupils, yet he moved with perfect ease, not seeming blind at all. He stroked his beard thoughtfully, muttering to himself, "That's not right. That girl should have been gone long ago." First time, killed instantly in a gas explosion. Second time, jumped straight from the examination hall window. Third time, forced by that boy SKSK, died horribly. Truly tragic. A young man came up from behind and gently took his arm. "Uncle, what nonsense are you muttering about now?" The shop owner allowed himself to be led back into the store, still mumbling. "But heaven always leaves a sliver of hope. Third time's the charm, they say. Survive 3 times, and even heaven might soften its heart." The young man just shook his head, smiling helplessly as he guided the old man inside. Time flew by, and soon it was the university admission season again. Julian discreetly reached out to several graduate advisors at Shanghai Normal University, sending carefully chosen gifts. He wasn't worried about Eleanor passing the entrance exam. He was concerned about her getting unfairly screened out during the interview stage. When Eleanor went to find him at his office, he was in the middle of a seminar with several important clients in a plush VIP room. Learning she was Mr. Chen's girlfriend, the young women at the front desk eyed her with a mixture of envy and admiration. After all, Alex Chun was the miracle man who went home to cook dinner every night after work and consistently topped the sales charts month after month. According to office gossip, his commissions over the past year were already enough for a small down payment on an apartment in Shanghai. Guided into a waiting area, Eleanor watched through the transparent glass wall. The young man, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, stood confidently at the head of the conference table, presenting product details to his clients. He moved with effortless grace and self-assurance, looking completely at ease, as if he truly belonged in that world of high finance. A sudden, overwhelming wave of self-consciousness washed over her. She felt inadequate, out of place. Just watching him felt like a form of torture. Julian finished his meeting and hurried out, finding Eleanor sitting quietly in the waiting room, clutching a book. Seeing him, she stammered. "Ah, this is a collection of essays I wrote. I self-published one copy. It's for you." She thrust it towards him awkwardly. "Thank you for taking care of me this past year." He found her earnestness endearing. She looked like she desperately wanted to snatch the thin volume back and rip it to shreds, yet she offered it with a mixture of pride and shame. He took the book and deliberately flipped through it with a playful air of critique. Isn't this a bit simple?" She looked utterly mortified. Seeing his chance, Julian pressed his advantage. "Doesn't matter. I still require payment." He leaned in. "A kiss." He closed his eyes, his neatly trimmed hair falling softly against his forehead. He smelled clean and fresh. A phrase popped into Eleanor's mind. "He smells like mint." Oh God, she wanted to write poetry about him. This was getting dangerous. They shared a sweet, lingering kiss. Satisfied, Julian finally opened the book of essays and on the title page, signed his name with a flourish. Eleanor peered at the signature. "Julian Croft? Who's that?" He froze for a split second, then recovered smoothly. "Ah, that was an old pen name I used back when I tried writing fiction." Unexpectedly, Eleanor was impressed. "It sounds great. Very commanding. Like a CEO's name." Julian managed a wry smile. "Right, the kind of CEO whose company goes bankrupt, who gets liver cancer from stress, and who ends up hanging himself in misery." He rubbed his nose. "Let's just keep that between us, okay? It's kind of embarrassing, that whole phase." The girl leaned against him gently. "Okay, it'll be our secret name." Then, her voice soft and sweet, she whispered it. "Julian Croft. Julian Croft." Her voice grew more serious with each repetition, her eyes misting over slightly. Julian stared at her, stunned. Did she truly not know? Or had she seen everything, understood everything, and simply chosen not to say anything? In the narrow confines of the rented room, their quiet conversation drifted, filled with warmth and understanding. "Start packing. We're moving in a few days." Moving where?" "I found a small place near your university campus. The down payment I saved is enough for a 2-bedroom. "What? I'm not moving in with you." He silenced her protest with another kiss. A gentle breeze wafted through the open window, rustling the pages of the thin essay collection lying on the table. On the title page, beneath his signature, were 2 sets of handwritten lines, like poems answering each other across the paper. "I was but a grain of sand fallen to the bottom. That I became a pearl was because your love enveloped me layer by layer. Eleanor. As water shapes the mountain channels the water. You are the pulse upon my heart, stirring my soul, a spring that never runs dry. Julian Croft."